Okay, folks, it's almost starting time. We'll give it another minute, and then we'll get going. Are we ready? Okay, welcome back, everybody. We have a good lunch? Find somewhere decent to go, I hope. All right. Up next is the promised HALEU presentation, and we'll just jump right into it. Jeff, whenever you're ready. I guess I should have waited for Heather to be ready.
Is Heather? Oh, she's up? Okay. All right. So I am Jeff Bentley. I am with the department. I am the H area program manager. Some of you may remember me from last September. I did come and give you a briefing on the ABD mission. Today I'm here to talk about the high assay low enriched uranium, or what we lovingly refer to as HALEU, downblend project. Well, do I have to point this somewhere? I will talk about HALEU. Give me a moment. Okay, so I thought I'd just first start out with an explanation on what is HALEU, what do we mean when we talk about that, and just to give you a basic understanding, we are talking about uranium, and we are talking really roughly about two isotopes of uranium, uranium-238 and uranium-235. If you know your periodic table, you know that uranium has an atomic number of 92, which means it's got 92 protons, 92 electrons. Well, the rest of its mass is made up of neutrons that are in the nucleus. So when we talk about uranium-238 versus uranium-235, we're talking about uranium isotopes that differ in the number of neutrons that they have in their nucleus. Other than that, some of the characteristics of those isotopes may differ, but they are both uranium. So we start talking about enrichment, which is actually the percentage of uranium-235 in the mixture that makes up the uranium solution. I'm only using, there are other isotopes outside of uranium-235 and 238, but for the most part, when we're talking about what we have, it's over 99%, one of these two isotopes, okay? So I'm not gonna worry about anything at all about the rest. Uranium-235, that is the fissile isotope that can be used to produce a chain reaction in the nuclear reactors. So that's why uranium-235 is important, and that's why enrichment of uranium solution is important. To give you an idea, natural uranium that we mine out of the ground, is mostly uranium-238. It is got a slight percentage of 235. You can see up there, 0.71%, not much at all, okay? We have other terms that we use for enrichment, low enriched uranium. That is an enrichment of 235 that makes up 3 to 5% of your total. What I'm here today to talk about, high assay low enriched uranium, is somewhere between 5 and 20%. Specifically for us, we're talking roughly almost 20. It's going to be roughly 19.75% uranium-235. And then highly enriched uranium, which is anything that has 235 and a concentration over 20%. If you want to talk about what's the difference between highly enriched uranium and then once you get up to like weapons grade, highly enriched uranium, weapons grade is over 90%. I don't have any of that I'm dealing with in H Canyon, so just to let you know. Let me go on. So the HALEU downblend project, what is it? It's an agreement between the Office of Environmental Management and the Office of Nuclear Energy. We just recently signed a memorandum of agreement to pursue this project. We signed it in, well, our office here, Environmental Management at the site, signed it in February. Nuclear Energy has signed it, and I just received a copy of that signed memorandum yesterday, as a matter of fact. So it is done. The scope that we're talking about when we talk about for this HALEU downblend project is that we are going to have to do some work over at H Canyon to get things ready. We're going to have to restart our outside canyon facilities. That's the main scope of work that we have. I got a list up here of some of the things that entails for restarting, which includes looking at the systems that we have outside and inspecting those, repairing what needs to be fixed, procuring equipment that may be failed. We're going to have to go back and train some of our operators in order to perform the downblending functions for this project. We'll revise procedures that need to be revised. We'll go through all the normal safety and startup aspects of a project. Okay, we'll look at the safety basis and make any changes we have to make to there to ensure that we're going to operate safely, and then we'll run through facility self-assessments and readiness assessments, and then perform cold runs to ensure that we are ready to actually perform these operations. Another critical aspect of this project will be certifying containers that we can use to ship the HALEU that we downblend to the facility that will take it and fabricate the fuel that will be used by the Office of Nuclear Energy. We are just downblending uranium to reach the right specification. We are not actually making the fuel. That will be done somewhere else. But we have to ship it there, so certification of containers is important. And then the actual production and the shipping, we'll have to integrate with that facility just to ensure that we can develop the right schedule and that we both are capable of meeting the delivery dates. So we do have some previous experience with downblending over at H Canyon. I want to let that be known that back in the early 2000s, from 2003 to 2011, when we were recovering uranium, we used to downblend that into low enriched uranium, which, as I mentioned earlier, was between 3 and 5%. We would downblend it with somewhere I don't remember the exact number, but it was 4-point-some%. It would go to the Tennessee Valley Authority, and they would use that to produce the fuel that they needed for some of their nuclear reactors. During that time period, we downblended and shipped almost 15 metric tons of low enriched uranium to Tennessee Valley. So we have experience downblending and we have experience shipping. Okay. But those shipments, however, did end in 2011. I don't know politics behind it. I don't know the reasons behind it. I just know that TVA found another source for what they needed, and for us, we stopped shipment. And of course, you guys may remember part of that is how we ended up, when I gave you the update on ABD, of how we ended up with ABD. Without a customer, without somebody willing to pay for the recovering uranium and downblending and running out of room in L Basin, that's how we got to ABD. But here we are, we do have experience. So all those systems are still intact from those days. So that's a key aspect here. We're not completely, not completely sure the status of each of those since they have not been run, but we'll be going through all those pre-checks. The other thing to note here is that while we stopped shipping or downblending and shipping in 2011, I think I updated you back September that we didn't stop recovering uranium in 2011. We actually kept recovering uranium all the way up till 2019 when we shut down the first cycle within the canyon of the recovery operations. So for those 8 years, we sat there recovering uranium slowly. And we have enough material that we've recovered over that period of time that we're going to be able to generate somewhere between 2 to 3 metric tons of the HALEU for the Office of Nuclear Energy. So what are the big benefits? I'll start with the Office of Nuclear Energy. So up until they can find a domestic commercial producer of HALEU, this is going to kind of give them a kickstart for their advanced reactors that they hope to have coming online. I believe the timetable is somewhere in early 2030s, if I'm not mistaken. It's roughly just under 10 years now. Some of you may have heard the term small modular reactors. Those types of reactors are part of these advanced reactors that will use HALEU as their fuel source. So that's why this is important. These 2 to 3 metric tons will get them going initially and buy them some time for developing the commercial applications for generating the HALEU. For us, on the environmental management side, specifically here at Savannah River, it created several benefits. First of all, we did not have to find a disposition path for this material that we have, this highly enriched uranium that we have stored at H Canyon. So that was first and foremost. If we did not find a disposition path, really the only alternative at the moment that you can readily think of is that we would have had to send this off with disposition under the ABD mission, which we would have discarded it to the liquid waste system. So by having this other pathway come up, it resulted in us not having to send that over, which results in less waste material that will have to go to DWPF, which results in less canisters that will have to be produced over time. So for us, that was a win. The other win is on the safety and security aspect of storage of the highly enriched uranium. The sooner that we have it downblended and off the site, the sooner that liability goes away, and we don't have to worry about that anymore. And then we also will be revitalizing our downblending operations, and for whatever future program or project that the Office of Environmental Management decides to pursue, or we get directed to pursue at H Canyon, we'll have those facilities that are operational if they ever want to be used again. And with that, that's really it. Any questions on what I went over, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions from around the table? Jim, we'll start with you.
There we go. Jim Giel, Cab.
Mm-hmm.
Help me out here. I'm struggling with taking material that's 5% 235 and downblending it to 20%.
Sorry. So what we have is highly enriched uranium from our recovery operations, and that means it's over 20% already. All right, if it's highly enriched, and to give you an idea, back when and this will also help answer maybe Narendra's question from earlier today. I don't know the specifics on uranium concentrations in each of the spent fuel bundles that we have over in L area, but I do know that when we run our fuel through the canyon and dissolve it and purify and enrich it, the highly enriched uranium that we usually comes out somewhere, and it's in the low 60% uranium-235. So that's the enrichment level. What I've got right now that is available to downblend, it's already been mixed somewhat, it's in the 40% range of 235. So we're going to downblend material that is over 40% down to 19.75, and ship that to the fuel fabricator to create the HALEU fuel.
Okay. Is the process that you go through within H Canyon in a liquid process?
Yeah, so in H Canyon, we bring in solid fuel, we dissolve it. This is right now, what we're talking about, what we've been doing is aluminum-based fuel. It's solid, we bring it in, we dissolve it with nitric acid. It is a liquid solution at that point. And so what we're talking about is a liquid.
And the downblending process takes place as a liquid?
Yes, we'll add natural uranium, which I showed you only has a percentage of 0.71 U-235, and that will be what is used to downblend to get to the percentage that we want.
Okay,
But yes.
thank you.
Mhm.
Charles?
You mentioned that H Canyon's obviously up and running, but the supporting structures, are we talking piping systems to bring in new chemicals, or are we talking major investments, or just making sure that what you already got's intact and the pumps still run, and basically minimal investment?
So these systems are in place. There's piping system, but all the systems that you're talking about are already there. They just haven't been used since 2011. So there may be components that have to be replaced, pumps, agitators, things of that nature. That is part of it. Probably the bigger part of this will be just making sure that we go back and all of our operators are up to date on their training, and we go through all that process. That's really the bigger aspect of this. I don't anticipate any major issues with the infrastructure side of the house. The other good news is this is Office of Nuclear Energy will be paying for this project. This is their material. They're paying us to get that system up and running, and to deliver the material to the fuel fabricator.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from around the table? Candace? Oh, I'm sorry.
Candace Cave Cab.
Mhm.
So what is the waste that's made from this process? Is it just the sludge? Is there a waste product made?
Not in this case. This is already
A waste.
purified uranium that we have that had already gone through the canyon. Okay, we're not bringing anything in and recovering and creating waste as we do that. This has already been through the process. It's just sitting in a storage tank waiting for disposition, right? So all we're going to do is add another form of uranium, natural uranium, to it to get the right concentration. There's no waste byproduct here.
Charles?
It comes to you solid, you dissolve it, you downblend it. Do you convert it back to a solid, or is that what the fuel fabricator does? So you'll be shipping liquid.
We'll be shipping liquid. There are containers that we used when we did the low enriched uranium that we shipped. That was liquid as well. And those are the containers that they've already done low enriched uranium. We believe they can be certified to ship this higher concentration of uranium.
So shipping liquid is nothing new for you.
Right. It's not.
Okay.
Just a higher, like I said, a higher concentration. There's a process that we'll go through for certification. Make sure everything's in place.
Somehow I feel better with solid, but okay.
Right. But so it has to be converted. Well, we don't have that capability right now to do that. So it will have to get converted to an oxide form, solid form, and then it gets made into the fuel. But perhaps if you had the HB line back in the old days, maybe they could have done it. But I don't know. That's not an option anymore. Yeah. But it will be a liquid being shipped. We've shipped liquid. We shipped them obviously for 8 years when we shipped it to Tennessee Valley Authority as the low enriched. And people do ship highly enriched uranium. We haven't, or at least not from the site, but it does occur. There are containers for highly enriched. In fact, we received some containers. It was before I came over and took this position, but we got some stuff from Canada that came in these real small containers that was liquid, and it was highly enriched.
Okay. Anything else around the table? Seeing none. Jeff, thank you.
All right.
All right. Up next, we've got a presentation from Kyle Kilroy on NQA1. And if you, like me, wonder what that is, he's going to tell us. Forwards, backwards, laser.
Got it. We're good.
He's good.
I'm Kyle Kilroy. I'm the Assistant Manager for Nuclear Materials Stabilization. I work with half the folks you've talked to today. Just raise your hands. Anybody heard of NQA1 before? Okay, so you may not have ever, general public probably has no clue what NQA1 is, or ASME. So American Society of Mechanical Engineers, NQA1 is the National Quality Assurance Standard for nuclear facilities, right? It is a consensus code standard, which means it's not a federal requirement, it's not a law. What it basically means is all these companies send their senior subject matter experts together, and they decide on what the code should say. How do we protect the public? How do we protect life, safety, the plant through a consensus standard? So that is basically what ASME NQA1 is. It's 43 years old, started in 1979. Current edition has 369 pages, and every sentence in that document has been argued over for the last 40 years. It's in its 14th edition. I think Savannah Riverside's using a version back or two. Just how DOE works, they get implemented slowly over time as each standard changes. The NRC, just a couple logos up here. Every part of DOE uses it. All the sites use it. Not all the sites use the exact same version. Each year there are small changes to the additions. There's not been one every year, but the other thing that also happens too is sometimes there are interpretations. So what does this code mean? So the code committee members get together and they argue or agree, or they read through interpretations about how do we interpret, how does this thing work? So just to give you what, I'm not going to read it to you, I just want to give you a feel for what it is and let y'all ask questions and just basically give you a feel for what it is. So it's kind of language out of one. This talks about design basis. So in those 369 pages, there's like 14 different sections, and they cover everything from pipe cleaning to how do you order something, right? So if you order it, how do you keep your records straight? How do you keep the documents right? It's applicable to every SSC, so I'm going to hit y'all with some acronyms. So that's structure, systems, or components. So it applies to everything from the front door all the way to our nuclear facilities. And then what they have is what we call a graded approach, and I'm going to go to that more in just a minute. But the bottom line is we're trying to verify that we have what we have and we have what we need. So do we understand what's critical to quality? When we talk about critical to quality, what are those things that really matter to us? And in some cases they matter a lot, sometimes they don't matter at all. It's about having the right thing at the right place and making sure we know exactly what we have. We started about NQA1. Most project managers roll their eyes or put their head down because it's something nobody really wants to talk about, and it usually drives cost up. So in a commercial world, you may not have like an NQA1 standard, but you have building codes and standards, or you have an industrial code and standard, or you have an environmental requirement. So this is just one more set of requirements on top of those. So I talked about a graded approach. So the easiest way I thought about explaining this, so here's my kitchen, all right? So, and there's my kids. So if I'm cooking dinner for my kids versus my dog, because now that's kind of the thing, which is cook dinner for your dog or cook dog treats, I might cook things differently, right? So my standards and my quality control might be different for what I'm going to give my dog than my kids. But there's one of my daughters. So Ruby, she has a fish and seafood allergy. So I'm going to be really careful about what I cook for her and make sure that like the shrimp doesn't touch the steak or the shrimp. So you have to have that graded approach. I brought an example in here because I think this is quality in itself. So we got two things of tuna here, right? One is cracked pepper and sea salt. Anybody want to try it? And the other one is churro stew for your cat, right? Now, would you believe? All right, so this is quality. This is such a good example of quality. So this one was $1.12. This was $1.14. So the cat food costs more and is half as much. So one of the things, like, you don't always get what you pay for, right? So you can't always go by price. And on the back here it says, don't feed the people, right? But honestly, the same packaging, very similar material, the same thing goes to everything that we use out at the site, out in the real world. You know, if we order steel, what is in the steel? That matters. And from an engineering perspective, how strong it is, who touched it last, how many cycles of heat treatment has it gone through? You know, was it exposed to chlorides? You know, we're trying to anticipate those things that could cause us problems. And so understanding where things have come from really, really matters. And going by, oh, well, if this one costs more, it must be better, right? That's really not true anymore. And if anybody wants to try they're up here. And then it's really interesting, too. So the Department of Energy has brand new facilities, right? So the upper right-hand corner on that slide is UPF. It's the Uranium Processing Facility at Y12. Brand new facility, implemented the newest guidelines and standards, and getting a new part. The guide basically covers all of those steps and makes sure that whatever. Here's another example. So like I said, the code applies to all kinds of different things. You know, we talk about our actual digs. So we had glass beads. As we get into more realistic simulants, right? So now all of a sudden we've got glass particles and sand, right? Where does the sand go? Into quality, into safety, into the environment. And that's really what NQA1 imposes on us. It also makes sure that when we do a calculation or a drawing, that we have a checker and it's verified. So our admits have been in Riverside for years to come. You know, we have a really good, what we call like a design basis and a good record of all the things that are out there. They designed that the first time. Like, why didn't they pick a positive displacement pump versus a centrifugal? So a positive displacement pump kind of pumps in and out like a diaphragm. Pick a diaphragm pump, right? So sometimes the loss of concept of, hey, why didn't they pick an alternate gets lost with time. And so we have to come back and reverse it. But why didn't they pick something different? And so sometimes it's keeping a hold of that legacy information, that history information gets passed down verbally. A challenge. 40 years of those things, acrylic vessel. This was used in some in their waste tanks out in Sellafield in the UK. And there's it mixing. At any rate, NQA1 covers everything that have, like, so if we install a new bathroom, right, it's not going to have nuclear quality bathroom in it, but it does cover how we order and procure things, and then make sure that we use the right approach of how NQA1 works. And I figured it would be a better opportunity to let y'all ask questions. And I've been, so just so you know about me, I've signed the last 3 editions, and when I got started, I didn't even know what NQA1 was. I knew NQA1 flowed into my engineering requirement, and we had gotten into some new territory where we were working on some new first-of-a-kind things, and I was like, I don't understand where the question, I understand how this works, I understand the process, and it's actually made me a better engineer in the long run, understanding exactly where the...
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, when there are some modifications, let's say DWPF, do they have 2008 or 2009?
Okay. So there's a code of record for every facility, and then it goes with whatever the current site implementation standard is. So right now I don't know offhand. The other thing I'll say too is most of the changes in the last couple of issues have been relatively minor. They were just to look at what the current standard was versus the one that's been implemented, and if there was something that was higher or smarter for us to do, we would implement whatever made the most amount of sense. But the additions have been us arguing over software definitions. Once again, that's another reason why staying involved really helps understand.
There are still about 18 requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And has there been any change for?
No, most of the changes that I've been involved with were software related, and then combinations of a few sections. But yeah, all those requirements are still out there for the lead auditors, et cetera.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jim?
I assume that you do have an assessor who does audits, et cetera,
We do. We have, there are a bunch. Yes, sir.
and the frequency and how have been the results on these audits?
So there's an assessment schedule, and the contractor has we have a couple QA programs, and they have an assessment schedule, and they are done continuously. There are assessments happen all the time. It's not like just a one or done thing. We also do assessments before every big project or big change starts up. So like even the glycolic acid, the glycolic changes in the flow sheet, they did an assessment before that started up. And inside of all that were also those NQA1 standard requirements that were checked against. Because they basically, the way it happens from a quality perspective, we have the NQA1 requirements that are a higher overriding perspective, and they get flowed in through the QAP or the QAM, which is the Quality Assurance Manual or the Quality Assurance Procedure, and then they get flowed down into the daughter documents. And then when we go off and do an assessment, we are checking against all of those. At the same time, we're also looking back at the parent documents to make sure that we're still in alignment. But yeah, there are NQA1 auditors. That happens all the time. There's a schedule. You'd have to get the site quality manager to give you the exact schedule. I don't have it. But yeah, those have happened frequently. And the last one I was involved with was the glycolic changes.
And these requirements for NQA1 flow down to your prime contractors and
They
their
do.
subs?
They do, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Candace, you got a card up, and I saw it went down. Did your question get answered?
I actually did not have a question. I had a comment.
Oh.
And this is one of the first presentations where I totally understood everything. I didn't have any questions, and I didn't have to ask any questions. And not because I just didn't want people to know that I didn't understand. I actually understood it. And thank you for the visuals.
You're welcome.
I've never heard that comment before, by the way. Not once. 12 years, that's a first. Charles?
I think I kind of understand what we're doing on a reactor vessel, let's say. You have to have a pedigree of every piece of steel, every nut and bolt that bolts that thing together. At what point does that pedigree end? Is it just what touches the nuclear fuel, or does it go out to the acid tank yard, to the electric line? I mean, these for 3/8-inch nuts. You know, this was in the exposés when they went out of business. I buy 3/8 a little different from what y'all do.
Yeah.
But where does it stop?
And so that's a good question. So it really, it's all in defining if you looked at like a facility and whether or not you credit it, that would all matter. But the way we actually do it in safety space is, okay, if we lose power, we lose power. We have backup generators. Those backup generators, we know where every nut and bolt came from because it matters. The problem when you look at so the thing we're talking about is really like suspect and counterfeit parts, right? So if we have a counterfeit bolt come in, and having broken my share of bolts, right? So if you over torque a cheap bolt, it snaps, right? And then all of a sudden it doesn't perform its safety function. And so that's when it matters. So yeah, so we try and draw a circle. Hey, this is my process boundary. I make sure everything inside of it is safe, especially if it protects a safety function. And then the other piece too, in the long run, you know, if we order a bolt or a valve, it comes with that pedigree. How long do we keep that pedigree, right? So I'll tell you, so like the waste containers that we ship to WIP, one of the things we ship with those is like the acceptable knowledge packet is what it's called. And they can be that thick. And that has the pedigree of everything that's in it that we know about and everything that went in that container. And it basically forms up, hey, here's what's in it and here's how we know that we know. And that lives with it until it's finally disposed of. And then those still become permanent records that honestly last forever. Now, some of our stuff, when we don't need it anymore and like we D&D a facility, that's when some of those records went in, right? So we know that vessel was 304L. It's never going to be used as a tank again, so we're going to cut it up and use it. At that point, the records no longer matter. You know, if it's happened more than you can't specially manufacture a spark plug, right? I want a nuclear quality spark plug, all right? That doesn't exist. And so the question was, how do we apply NQA1 standards to spark plugs? Just mechanics that can swap out a spark plug really quick. And that's really where we got to. Like, all right, we got to make practical sense where we can, but at the same time, we got to make sure that we're protecting safety and health where we have to.
You're crazy impressed, aren't you?
I am. No, I feel sorry for you.
Any other questions from around the table? Seeing none. Kyle,
All right,
thank
thank you.
you. All right. So up next, we have our committee chair elections. We have paper ballots that we can hand out if you want to, but Heather's gone ahead and put those online, or not online, but digitally for the clickers. If that's okay with everybody, we could knock that up. We are. I was going to get to that. So up under your nameplate, you'll notice that there is a little white handheld device. Green, red, and yellow buttons. It's basically 1, 2, and 3. It is anonymous voting. We don't track back who voted with what. This allows you to cast your vote on any piece of board advice anonymously with nobody knowing how you voted. It tabulates the votes automatically, and it enables us to do things pretty quickly here. Yes, you better. It doesn't. It'll work right out of the box. Yeah, we checked every one of them religiously, which means they're absolutely about to fail right now. So, but are we okay with doing the elections that way? Okay. Will you pull up the first one?
James, also before we do that, can you explain to everybody about what this new committee is, the long-term missions and budget?
I will, but I feel extremely uncomfortable doing it. No, so there was the recent recommendation passed by the board talking about looking at the NNSA transition, the landlord transition, and making sure that the board was going to be kept in the loop about what was going to happen. As part of the response, DOE's commitment was actually to amend the board's 2023 work plan and on through to include a new committee. And so we are standing up this new committee that needs a chair, and their principal function will be to look at issues surrounding the landlord transition. And so we are electing today the chair of that committee.
The only thing I want to add to that, that was very good, James. The only thing I want to add is we also noticed in our conversations with you guys, we have not been spending as much attention on the Savannah River National Laboratory as we would like to. And that is the only EM lab in the entire complex. So we feel like it's important that we start with increasing your awareness of what goes on at the National Lab, which is a long-term mission. Won't be part of the transition. That'll stay with EM. So that's part of this committee as well.
Thank you. That is a good point, yes. Okay. Now are we ready? Let's go. So this is the long-term missions and budget chair. The top button will be for a vote for Carlos. The next one is for Narinder. And lastly is for Hubert. You go ahead and vote now. Just push the button and it'll cast your vote.
The top button is for Carlos. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're good. You see in the little window? Yeah.
15. One person hasn't voted yet, right? There's 15 of us here.
That's what I got.
You should just have to push the button. So just in case.
If you
We've got one
haven't
person who
pushed, push
hasn't voted.
again.
Just push again, please, if you haven't, or just in case. There it is. Okay. Carlos, congratulations. You have picked up a chair. All right. Let's go to the next one. For admin and outreach, we have Juanita Campbell and Narinder Malik. Please vote now. Vote early, vote often. Well, what if y'all grab the public comments? All right, folks. Comment, Don Moniak. If you'll come to the microphone, please.
Thank you. My name is Don Moniak. I live in Aiken County, South Carolina, and I have for 22 years. Prior to that, I lived in the Texas for a watchdog group called STAND at that time, then moved here to work for Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, following the issues again. I'd like to bring up a few things. I'd like to request to this board there be a presentation on the condition of the dams. There'd be a condition of the dams and any other impoundment structures on the site, considering how the dams across the state have failed. Quite sure of that. What is their design life? And as much information you provide. What are the inspection reports shown in recent years? Years of inspections on all impoundments. I'd like to see too, Ms. Boyette brought up the fact that we've not been paying enough attention to the National Lab, an off-site office complex for the Savannah River National Laboratory, using $20 million of funds that were obtained from the plutonium mine. It will serve human resource functions as being called a workforce development facility, but the direct example, most weapons work that determines the reliability test. There haven't been tests since the early 90s. So computational work is a pretty wide range of issues. So I think the CAB should request the entire, I've done this before, but they are a weapons lab. Primary mission, they are the only lab in the country. There's nobody else with any comparable capabilities, experience, or knowledge. They are the tritium lab. And tritium, there was no tritium in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. but add 4 grams of tritium and you have, as far as the off-site facility goes, people in the area have they have an obligation, site analyses that have been done, documentation requirements. To what extent will classified operations take place, which in turn raise the security profile and requirements? Street, the busiest street in town, in the north side of town, and what are they going to be doing in there? I can tell you that stated during the announcement to alleviate concerns, he said there'll be no chemicals on site, and several people in the audience laughed. It's January 25th, State of the City, City of Aiken YouTube. You can watch his reaction. He said he was not joking about that. He was trying to put people at ease that this will not be a chemical laboratory moving off site. And that's true, it will not be. So little knowledge creates another issue that you could bring up in here, and it ties into this very last presentation, which was really good. It's really good to hear the word, because the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board, that's something that they focus on every day of the week. And this is a board that's the most effective oversight we as citizens have in the nuclear side. So when was the last time the board has been asked to provide info about its role on the EM side of SRS? For example, how serious was it when a safety base, their reports, their weekly reports, and they're delayed because they have to go through classification. And they're seldom censored, and all of a sudden, large portions of the Defense Board's reports were redacted because it affected it, it was spread on site, you'd have to expect that. They weren't exempt. For the Tank 25 purge exhaust fan, this is an occurrence from just a few months ago. Operations noticed steam vapors coming from purge stack. The purge fan was secured. The Tank 25 purge reheater has a functional class of safety class and is accredited control by the term waste tank explosion. Most occurrence reports don't tell you what the consequences are of a failed set of safety. This was in 2013. They didn't say anything about a waste tank explosion. And every day people go out to work at SRS, one of their primary missions is iodide. So that's a major issue. That's why the waste has to be processed into the salt waste. That's what they call material that, if it was to be part of an explosion, would contaminate the countryside. You're not covered. None of us are. We'd have to rely upon the federal government to come in and reimburse us for the lost market value. One really knowledgeable body that could provide information as to what is really important, affecting people's health, but it's the entirety of impacts. And you can do all the health studies you want, and they'll all come out inconclusive by design, unless you go to Bhopal or someplace like that, where it was so obvious that a release killed people and harmed them that you didn't even have to do a study. This is a long-term issue, inconclusive by design. What is needed is training on how to recognize the symptoms of possible impacts. For example, if you put 20 people in a patch of poison ivy, how many are going to end up in the hospital requiring a shot? Probably maybe one at the most. I've been on 20-person crews out west on fires where we're all in poison oak for 4 or 5 days, and some people got a little bit of poison ivy, oak, and some people were in the hospital. So the radiation exposure, toxins exposure is all variable. But if there was an accident occurring, exposures at background level might, adding to that exposure, Augusta Bus Service headquarters used to be right here. These are most affected by the shadows of the weapons complex, and SRS is part of the weapons complex. Places like Barnwell County, which is more often down, this is where the proximity to the waste he made a in 2021 when they were outreach and outreach is not being done and people aren't being informed correctly. There should be at least 2 opportunities for public comment during the day as well, at the afternoon one. And then if somebody was to bring in a really important issue that the board should be hearing about, you'd be hearing about it earlier in the day. Since there's nobody else here, I'd also like to see, I would have had a question if I was sitting there about the FH lab. The comment was made that there's materials in there that have to be taken care of. What materials are in there? I was just curious if there's any plutonium-238 in there. H, if there's, I know this isn't pretend to require this, that's going to require of uranium above that 5%, unless they had.
You need to probably give them a chance to look at it again. Oh, that's on the other laptop, isn't it? Remember, you have the letter in front of you. There was about 4 or 5 people who said yeah.
Okay.
So out of there's a motion and a second.
Is there a second? Is there any other?
Yay, nay, abstain, folks. These are our options. It's just to be sure. Approval. Congratulations. We've done 4 where you had more? What's that? Oh, yes, the April subcommittees. Please remember, we're not going to be meeting at the DOE Meeting Center this time. Heather sent this out last week. We'll be at the Aiken Senior Life Center for the April 18th subcommittee meetings, okay? All right. Anything else we want to talk about, folks? Charles, the floor is yours, sir.
Have we reminded everyone to sign these if they don't?
Need a signature from it.
You don't need a signature at all.
No.
Just make sure you leave it for Heather to
You
pick
can even
up.
take it for posterity.
Oh, we can take it for posterity now.
You can.
See, I'm learning too. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you for participating. I am especially pleased with our